Alright, listen up, Anime Card Clash warriors. If you're diving into the world of Infinite Tower or gearing up for some intense PvP battles, you need to know one thing. Not all cards are created equal. With over 150 cards, each with its own unique ability and variations, it's easy to get overwhelmed. And just because a card is rare doesn't automatically mean it's OP. Some commons can totally wreck if played right, while certain ultra rares might not be worth the hype. So, how do you figure out which cards will carry you to victory and which ones belong in the discard pile? That's exactly what we're breaking down in our Ultimate Anime Card Clash card guide and tier list. Whether you're scaling the Infinite Tower or flexing your best deck in PvP, we've got you covered. We'll go over the absolute best picks, sneaky underrated cards, and strategies to maximize their potential. So buckle up, because by the end of this video, you'll have a deck that'll make your opponents rage quit before the match even starts. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking cards in Anime Card Clash. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching! Today I will be talking about the best cards for Infinite Tower and PvP. The cards in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Galactic Tyrant, Destroyer Deity, Nekomata, Sun Deity, Awakened Dark Avenger, Frost Demon, Sun Blaze Shinigami, Healing Fist, Sword Saint, Earth's Strongest, and Bald Hero. Alright, let's dive straight into the F tier of cards in Anime Card Clash, where the competition gets fierce, and not all cards make the cut. Now I know, the F tier sounds like it's full of complete duds, but believe me, there are some cards here that can still shine in the right situations. So, grab your snacks, and let's break down what makes these cards stand out, or not, in both Infinite Tower and PvP. Let's kick things off with the Galactic Tyrant. This one has a 30% chance to deal damage equal to 30% of the enemy's max HP on entry. Sounds cool, right? But that 30% chance? Yeah, it's pretty unreliable. Imagine you're counting on it to make a big impact, and it just doesn't happen. It's decent in raids and story, but outside of those, it really falls flat. It's like that friend who promises to bring snacks to the party but forgets every time. Next up is the Destroyer Deity. This card executes enemies below 15% HP with an explosion. Now, that sounds awesome, especially against cards that revive or hang on by a thread with 1 HP. But let's be real, it's a niche pick. You're not going to find yourself using this too often unless you're dealing with a very specific situation. The potential's there, but it's not a card you can rely on in every match. Then we have the Nekomata, a card that summons a random flame at the start of each turn. This flame can either heal the card for 10% of its max HP, reduce the opponent's next attack by 10%, or increase this card's next attack by 10%. Sounds pretty versatile, right? Well, in theory. The buffs it provides are pretty mild, and they don't make a huge difference in tougher battles. You're not going to break any records with this card, but it could be useful for stalling or creating some mild annoyance for your opponents. Now let's talk about the Sun Deity. This one deals between 60% and 150% damage with each attack. That's a pretty wild range, isn't it? One moment it's going hard, and the next it's barely scratching the surface. If you're lucky, you get the higher end, but most of the time, you're left wondering if the Sun Deity even remembered it was supposed to be a god. Consistency is key in PvP, and unfortunately, this one's a bit all over the place. The Awakened Dark Avenger deserves a mention here because it's pretty solid in raids and story modes. When this card gets defeated, it activates a storm that deals 10% of the opponent's max HP after one of your allies' attacks. It's a great way to make sure the opponent doesn't get away too easy, even when your card's down. But it's still a bit situational, so you have to time it right. The Frost Demon is next, and it's a little tricky. It plants a seed that grows after 1 turn and freezes the enemy for 2 turns. Now, freezing the opponent sounds cool, pun intended, but it's honestly very situational. If you don't have a follow-up strategy, you might just end up wasting that freeze, and in PvP, every turn counts. Another card that seems like it could be great is Sun Blaze Shinigami. Upon death, it applies permanent red flames to the enemy, dealing 2.5% of their max HP per turn. But honestly, when you compare it to most other DOT, damage over time cards, this one just doesn't pack enough punch. The opponent's going to shrug off those little burns like they're nothing, so it's not exactly going to win you the match. Last but not least, we've got the Healing Fist. This card heals allies for 10% of their max HP whenever it's attacked while in your party. Sounds decent, right? It's good for a little support, but the healing is just okay. In longer matches, you'll need something with a bit more power if you're planning on keeping your team alive. It's a nice little boost, but not game-changing. So there you have it. The F tier is full of cards that have their moments, but often lack the consistency or impact you need to really make a splash in PvP or the Infinite Tower. They're not the worst cards out there, but they definitely need some love, and maybe a buff or two, before they can compete at the highest level. The cards in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: 7 Sea King, White Panther, Red Dragon Emperor, White Dragon Emperor, Insect Hashira, Red Emperor, Sun Lion, Snake Empress, Bijou Beast, Mist Hashira, Dragon King, and Stone Hashira. Alright folks, grab your cards and buckle up because today we're diving into the wild world of anime card clash. We're talking about the Infinite Tower and PvP cards in the D tier, where the competition is fierce and the strategies are a bit, let's say, quirky. If you've been tinkering around with some of these cards, you know they can be a little hit or miss. But hey, that's what makes them interesting, right? Let's break them down. First up, we have the 7 Sea King and the White Panther. Now these two might look mighty with their high base damage and HP, but when you really look closer, they don't offer much else. No special abilities, no gimmicks, just pure power. It's like bringing a brick to a knife fight. It's heavy and strong, but it lacks the finesse to make it truly shine. They're solid, but that's about it. Then, we get to the Red Dragon Emperor and the White Dragon Emperor combo. Here's the thing. Red Dragon Emperor starts with a decent attack boost of 5% every turn. That's not bad, right? But if you're rolling with the White Dragon Emperor, that boost skyrockets to 15%. Sounds sweet, but only if these two are in your party together. You kinda need that dynamic duo to really feel the burn. Without the White Dragon Emperor alongside it, the Red Dragon Emperor feels like it's underwhelming. It's a great combo, but it's not a solo act. Speaking of that, the White Dragon Emperor has a similar deal, where it reduces the opponent's attack by 5% every turn. And yep, you guessed it. This gets juiced up to 15% if the Red Dragon Emperor is also around. So again, it's a solid play, but not if you're trying to fly solo. They need each other to truly shine, and if you don't have the right synergy, it's just not as impressive. Now let's talk about Insect Hashira. On paper, a 30% chance to disable the opponent's ability for 2 turns after attacking sounds pretty good, right? But here's the kicker. If that 30% doesn't trigger, you're left with a card that's pretty meh. It's kind of like playing the lottery, except instead of money, you win disappointment. Still, when that ability hits, it can be a game changer. Next up, we have the Red Emperor. This guy is all about shutting down the opponent's attack. When he enters the field, he reduces the enemy's attack by 15%. It's a nice little damage reduction buffer, which is handy in some situations. But let's be honest, you're not going to win any beauty contests with just this card. Still, if you're looking to keep things steady and defensive, the Red Emperor has your back. Here's a card that really turns up the heat during special times: Sun Lion. When the Harvest Moon cycle rolls around, this card gets a whopping 100% boost to both damage and HP. It's like flipping a switch and becoming a powerhouse for a limited time. But the catch? Outside of the Harvest Moon cycle, it's back to being just a regular lion, which feels kinda meh. Timing is everything with this card. Now let's talk about the Snake Empress. When this card gets attacked, she starts stacking up charges. Once she hits 3 charges, she heals for 40% of her max HP and freezes the opponent for 2 turns. Sounds awesome, right? The problem is, it's all about patience. You need some time and support around her to really make the magic happen. Without a good defensive setup, she's just hanging around, waiting for something to trigger. Finally, we have the Bijou Beast. This one's pretty fun because it gives you a 60% chance to dodge an attack. But here's the twist. Every time you dodge, that chance decreases by 16%. It's like a little game of cat and mouse. If you're lucky, you'll dodge a bunch of attacks, but if you're not, well, you'll be left vulnerable real quick. It's a bit of a gamble, but for those who love a good chance at avoiding damage, it's a decent card to roll with. So, there you have it. The D tier cards in Anime Card Clash. Some of them are better with friends. Some are great in the right cycle. and others are a bit of a wild card. If you've got any of these in your deck, you might want to think about how you pair them up or when to use them. The key to victory is all about timing and synergy, and sometimes taking a few risks. The cards in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Blade Warrior, Ice Empress Shinigami, Esper Prodigy, Love Hashira, Six Paths of Pain, Body Switcher, Wizard King, Childish Demon, Thunder Demon, Black Flame, Awakened Shadow Summoner, and Juice Queen. Alright, let's dive right into it. Now, if you're grinding through the Infinite Tower or duking it out in PvP in Anime Card Clash, you know how important it is to choose the right cards. Today, we're talking about some of the C-tier cards that may not get all the love they deserve, but hey, they've got their moments when used correctly. These cards might not always steal the spotlight, but they sure can surprise you if you play your cards right. Pun intended. Let's start with Blade Warrior. This card has that classic counterattack ability that reduces enemy damage by 25% after it's attacked. It's a solid pick for raids and story mode, especially when you want to hold your ground without worrying too much about the incoming damage. But when it comes to PvP or high-stakes battles, it may not be the heavy hitter you're hoping for. Still, in certain setups, it can provide some much-needed defense. Next up is Ice Empress Shinigami. Now this one's interesting. If an opponent attacks her 3 times, their damage is reduced by a whopping 90%. That's huge, right? Great for story, raids, and any situation where you're facing off against a single opponent. But here's the catch. It really falls flat in PvP and the Infinite Tower. Why? Well, those modes often involve multiple enemies, and the damage reduction just isn't as impactful in those scenarios. So, she's a bit situational. Then we've got Esper Prodigy. I have to say, this card is a bit of a wild card in itself. It gains damage equal to 100% of your missing HP. Think about that for a second. A potential comeback mechanic that could turn the tide of battle. It's great for when you're low on health and need that extra push. But without the right timing, it can be a gamble, so be careful. Now let's talk about Love Hashira. This card is a fan favorite for its random slashes that deal 30% damage per hit. If you get lucky and she slashes 5 times, you can trigger a bleed effect that lasts for 2 turns and deals 5% of the opponent's HP per turn. It's a solid damage dealer, but it's one of those cards that thrives on randomness. So, if you like a bit of unpredictability in your playstyle, she's worth considering, but it's no guarantee. Moving on to Six Paths of Pain, and if you're into stuns, this one's for you. On entry, it stuns all enemies for 1 turn. Plus, they take 15% more damage while stunned. That's a game changer if you need to control the pace of a battle. The damage boost while enemies are stunned can really rack up over time. However, it doesn't have much else going for it, so once the stun wears off, you're relying on your other cards to finish the job. Here's a card that always makes things interesting, Body Switcher. When it enters the battlefield, it copies 15% of the opponent's base damage and HP and adds it to itself. This is a pretty decent ability across all game modes. It can make Body Switcher tank a lot more damage or dish out extra hits, but the issue is that it relies heavily on the opponent's stats. Still, if you're looking to add a little extra punch to your squad, it's worth a shot. Now let's talk about Wizard King. This card has a 25% chance to warp time and heal back damage from the last attack after every turn. That's a pretty cool ability, right? The problem is that it's heavily dependent on luck. With enough RNG on your side, Wizard King can tank for ages, but if the odds aren't in your favor, it's not exactly the most reliable choice, especially against cards that reduce or manipulate RNG. Lastly, we have Childish Demon. This one's a bit quirky, as it randomly picks between stunning the opponent for 1 turn, poisoning them for 2 turns, dealing 10% of their maximum HP, or dealing 150% of damage. The variety is nice, but the unpredictability means you can end up with something underwhelming when you really need the right effect. Still, it adds some variety and surprise, which can throw off your opponents. So while these C-tier cards might not be your go-to picks in every match, they definitely have their moments. Whether you're looking to surprise your opponent or just need a little extra something in your deck, don't count them out entirely. Sometimes, it's the underdogs that make the biggest difference. The cards in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Cursed Doll, Terrible Tornado, Limitless Master, Rika's Blessing, Red Pilot, Flame Deity, Namekian Sage, Survey Commander, Divine Guide, Candy Master, Ultimate Warrior, and Ice Empress. Alright, so let's dive into some of the cards you'll definitely want to keep an eye on in Anime Card Clash, especially if you're working your way up the Infinite Tower or stepping into some intense PvP battles. Trust me, the right card can be the game changer you didn't know you needed. First up, we've got Cursed Doll. This one is a real sneaky gem. With a 50% chance to absorb 25% of your opponent's stats on hit, it can snowball like crazy if the conditions are right. Imagine hitting your opponent and suddenly you're gaining stats while they lose theirs. Yeah, it's that good for keeping up the pressure in a long match. Then there's Terrible Tornado. Honestly, this card is like having a personal bodyguard for your team. It reflects the first attack of an opponent back at them, dealing 50% of the intended damage. It's a perfect card for those raid fights where every little advantage counts. Just knowing that you can reflect the first big attack back can throw off your opponent's rhythm big time. Now, if you're someone who loves the thrill of a comeback, Limitless Master might just become your best friend. When it's under 50% HP, there's a 50% chance to fire off Purple, which deals 150% more damage. It's like having a secret weapon for those nail-biting matches where every move counts. If you're evenly matched with an opponent, this card has the potential to turn the tide and deal some major damage when you need it most. Next up, Rika's Blessing is another one that can really shine in the right situation. It boosts all allies' damage by 10% after every attack, meaning it could be a serious powerhouse if it survives a few turns. The key is surviving long enough to stack those boosts. But once it gets rolling, you'll see your whole team's damage output rise steadily with each hit. For those who love supporting their squad, Red Pilot is a solid pick. This card boosts the damage of all ally cards by 15% while it's in the party, which makes it a fantastic starting point for building a strong team. It's all about setting up your team for success early on, and Red Pilot can really help get you ahead in the damage race. If you're dealing with a lot of burns in your matches, Flame Deity is here to give you a major advantage. This card applies a permanent burn to the opponent on entry, and every time the opponent burns, Flame Deity gains a stack. When it hits 5 stacks against another player, it can execute the opponent. Basically, a ticking time bomb that gets stronger with every burn it inflicts. It's crazy strong for raids, and if you can manage it in PvP, you'll leave your opponents burning up in no time. And if you're looking to hit hard, Namekian Sage is a must-have for those one-shot potential moments. With a 60% chance to critically hit the opponent and deal 75% more damage, this card is perfect for taking down those pesky enemies before they can even react. If you're looking to get in, hit hard, and get out, Namekian Sage is your go-to card for that kind of playstyle. Lastly, Survey Commander is all about support, and trust me, it's a strong one. It boosts all party damage by 20%, and for every ally buffed, it gains an additional 15% increased damage. This is the card you want in your corner when you've got a team that relies on synergy. It can turn a good team into an unstoppable force if you play it right. Alright, there you go. Those are just a few of the cards that can seriously change the game in both the Infinite Tower and PvP. Each one has its unique strength, so make sure to build your team based on your playstyle and the kind of fights you're preparing for. Which one's your favorite? Let me know in the comments. The cards in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Awakened Galactic Tyrant, Awakened Prideful Prince, Null, Cursed Fist, Eternal Mage, King of Curses, Forest Sage, Final Shinigami, Mochi Emperor, Blue Slime, and Crimson Empress. Alright, let's talk about some of the most hype cards in Anime Card Clash, the ones that shine in PvP and Infinite Tower. And trust me, some of these picks will either make you rage quit or laugh maniacally as your opponent's strategy crumbles before their eyes. First up, Cursed Fist. Now, this bad boy has a 20% chance to curse the entire enemy party, making them take extra damage every time the active card gets hit. Sounds insane, right? Well, here's the catch. It's completely unreliable. When it procs, it's an absolute game changer. But when it doesn't, yeah, you're just sitting there hoping the RNG gods bless you. Still, if luck is on your side, this card is a nightmare in long fights. Then we have King of Curses, and let me tell you, this guy is out for blood. With a 25% chance to counterattack with 5 slashes, each dealing 10% of his max HP, he's a solid pick for attrition battles. You know that moment when your opponent thinks they landed a clean hit and suddenly, boom, 5 counter slashes right to the face? Yeah, it's that kind of satisfying. The only downside? The ability is chance-based, so you might have to pray to the RNG overlords once again. Now, Crimson Empress brings absolute chaos to the battlefield. A 40% chance to possess an enemy and make them attack their own team? That's just disrespectful. It's hilarious in PvP and Infinite Tower when it lands, especially when the opponent's strongest card turns traitor. But in raids and story mode, completely useless. No enemy party means no betrayal. So if you love mind games, she's your pick. But don't take her to a boss fight unless you want to feel like you wasted a slot. Mochi Emperor is a slippery little menace. With a 50% dodge chance and a stacking mechanic that nukes the entire enemy party once he collects 4 Mochis, this card is all about survival. If he keeps dodging, the enemy is in for a world of hurt. But the problem? Getting those 4 Mochis can take ages, and sometimes he just gets deleted before he can do anything. Still, watching him dodge over and over while your opponent loses their patience? Priceless. Let's talk about Final Shinigami, the undead warrior that just refuses to stay down. This guy revives with 20% HP, plus an extra 20% for every fallen ally. If the fight drags on, this card turns into an absolute monster. You take him down once, and he just keeps coming back stronger. It's basically a horror movie villain in card form. The longer the battle, the harder it is to get rid of him for good. And finally, Null, the wild card of the group. This dude creates a black hole with a 25% chance to absorb incoming attacks and convert 25% of the damage into a bonus for his next strike. If you love high-risk, high-reward gameplay, Null is for you. Sometimes you'll feel like an untouchable god as he eats up attacks and dishes out insane damage. Other times, you'll just watch him get obliterated because the black hole decided to take the day off. Either way, he's a fun pick if you like living on the edge. So, there you have it. Some of the most unpredictable, game-breaking, and downright hilarious cards for PvP and Infinite Tower. Whether you're making your opponent rage or just laughing at the chaos, these cards bring a whole new level of excitement to the game. Which one's your favorite? Let me know in the comments. The cards in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Awakened Frost Demon, Cosmic Villain, Awakened Six-Eyed Slayer, Biscuit Warrior, Lunar Guardian, Shadow Duelist, Blade Captain, Berserker Shinigami, Awakened Earth's Strongest, Genie Commander, and Awakened Promised Child. Alright, let's talk about the absolute monsters of Anime Card Clash. If you're aiming to crush Infinite Tower or dominate PvP, these S-tier cards are your best friends, or your worst nightmares, depending on which side of the battlefield you're on. First up, Awakened Frost Demon. This icy terror doesn't just enter the field, he brings a whole blizzard with him. The moment he shows up, the battlefield is coated in ice, and opponents have a 65% chance of getting frozen when they attack. That's not just crowd control, that's crowd devastation. Whether it's PvP or Infinite Tower, locking down enemy moves like this can single-handedly shift the tide of battle. Then we've got Cosmic Villain, a literal time bomb of destruction. This guy stores all damage taken, and when he finally falls, he transfers 35% of that stored damage into an attack boost for your allies. You might think letting him take hits is a bad idea, but trust me, when he goes down, your team turns into an unstoppable force. Perfect for strategies that involve a controlled sacrifice. Now let's talk about Awakened Six-Eyed Slayer. This guy is all about synergy. If you've got a full team of Mooncycle cards, he enters with an absolutely absurd 50% stat boost per card. That means with a proper setup, he can reach god tier levels of strength. But without Mooncycle support, he's kinda meh. So if you're planning to use him, make sure you build around him properly. One of the most satisfying cards to play is Biscuit Warrior. For every 10% of HP he loses, he summons a soldier that does 25% follow-up damage after his attacks. This means if he's taking hits but still standing, the battlefield just gets flooded with reinforcements. It's like an army that refuses to stop attacking, making him one of the best at finishing off enemies in long battles. Now, Lunar Guardian is a bit of a wild card. She gets a massive 100% boost to both HP and damage whenever she gets stunned, but only once per match. This makes her an absolute beast against stun-heavy opponents. The downside? If your enemy isn't running stuns, she's just a regular strong card with no special tricks. But when the stars align, she's terrifying. Speaking of battlefield manipulation, Shadow Duelist is the king of disrupting enemy strategies. He has a 25% chance to make opponents attack the next card in their party instead, dealing 40% damage. That might sound small, but in Infinite Tower and PvP, that random misdirection can ruin your enemy's plans completely. If they're setting up a combo, Shadow Duelist can throw a wrench right into their gears. Finally, let's talk about Blade Captain. He has a 35% chance to dodge an attack, and when he does, he immediately counterattacks with 3 rapid slashes, each dealing 50% damage. That's a huge amount of damage for simply avoiding a hit. He's perfect for players who love RNG mechanics and watching their opponents get frustrated when their attacks just don't land. So there you have it, some of the strongest cards you'll want to get your hands on for PvP and Infinite Tower. Whether you love freezing enemies solid, stacking ridiculous buffs, or just overwhelming your opponent with sheer force, these S-tier picks are your best bet for victory. What's your go-to pick? Let me know in the comments, and let's keep the fight going. The cards in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Soul Queen, Awakened Limitless Master; Soul King, Awakened Pale Demon Lord; Combat Giant, Eternal Dragon, Armored Giant; Compass Demon, the Impure Ghost and Beast Giant. Alright, let's talk about the real monsters of anime card clash. You know, the ones that make you question if balance even exists. The cards that make your opponents rage, quit, uninstall the game, and rethink their life choices. Yeah, we're diving into the S+ tier today, and trust me, some of these are downright unfair. First up, we have Soul Queen. If you like making your opponent suffer, this is your card. Every single card that enters the field against her gets frozen, burns for 3 turns, loses its entry abilities, and, just for good measure, gets a 20% stat reduction. Basically, if your opponent had a game plan, they don't anymore. It's like she personally ensures that every enemy card steps onto the battlefield already regretting its existence. Then we've got Awakened Limitless Master, and oh boy, is this one a PvP nightmare. First turn, he's just chilling. Second turn, maximum purple nukes, everything for 50% damage. Imagine setting up your whole strategy, and then, boom, half your health bar just disappears. If you don't take him out before he casts, you might as well start planning your next match. Now, if you love watching your character become an unkillable juggernaut, Soul King is your guy. Every time he defeats an enemy, he absorbs 25% to 75% of their HP and damage. This means the longer he survives, the more of an unstoppable soul-eating menace he becomes. It's like a final boss that just keeps getting stronger. Speaking of refusing to die, Awakened Pale Demon Lord is exactly what you'd expect from a name that metal. You kill him, he just comes back to life at full HP with 25% more max health, and after reviving, his attacks hit multiple times, making him a nightmare for anyone who thought they were done with him. This card basically turns every battle into a horror movie where the villain refuses to stay dead. Now let's talk about Combat Giant. You finally manage to defeat him, and surprise! He transforms, gets 150% of his previous HP, and does even more damage. Imagine thinking you won, only for this absolute tank to come back even stronger. He's perfect for every game mode because he just refuses to go down easily. For those who love cards that snowball into absurdity, Eternal Dragon is a dream come true. Every time it attacks, there's a 50% chance it'll roar, and every roar boosts its damage and HP by 25%. This means the longer a fight drags on, the bigger and badder it gets. If you let it stack too much, good luck stopping it. Finally, we have Compass Demon, the ultimate anti-RNG card. Any opponent that relies on luck? Yeah, they're out of luck, literally. Compass Demon shuts down all RNG-based abilities and also counterattacks for half the damage it takes. So not only does it ruin luck-based strategies, but it punishes anything that dares to hit it. Talk about a win-win. There you have it, the absolute best of the best in anime card clash. These are the cards that dominate Infinite Tower and PvP, the ones that make matches feel totally one-sided. If you have any of these in your deck, congratulations, you're probably making someone's day miserable. And if you're up against them, well, good luck, you're gonna need it. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.